Joe, you were saying that you want a work dom
I want to work Dom. Yes.
to do what?
To make me meet my deadlines. I think that it's helpful to be bossed around by someone that is not me in a lot of areas of life. Uh,
I I love this particularly because like I feel like so many people are so inclined to like hate their bosses. It's almost like built into workplace culture. But now that you're working for yourself, you're like, oh man, there was
I would
something
my
about
boss.
that.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
for my own business. I had my like a boss that was like hired to boss me around. I would worship that person. I just would. I'd be like, oh my God, yes, make me work on my calendar today. Like, I'll do anything for you. Um,
So
yeah, that's how I really feel about it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I
I
relate.
feel for some reason it's like I think that's maybe just like the chop in me being like, don't tell me what to do. I'm just so I can't have that. I like even when I have like a little app that tells me when my plants need to be watered, and I'm like, I know, shut up.
But
I
this is
had I gave myself a reminder on my phone a few months ago for like when I was going to be PMSing. Just like you might be PMSing right now in case you're having a rough few days. And when the reminder went off, I was like, I know, bitch. Like
Yeah.
I'm in this body. Don't tell me how I'm
Yeah.
supposed to feel. I
Yeah.
set the
You
reminder.
super condescending of you to remind me. Thank you.
Exactly.
delete. Yeah, I think that it's funny because in every area of my life, like typically, as soon as I have a boss, as soon as I sign my onboarding paperwork, we're fighting. I don't like you. I even if I like you, I don't want to like you.
Yeah.
Adversarial, headbutts has been this way my whole life. I'm completely resistant to authority every scenario, usually except for in kink, where I'm just like, I will bottom out for it just is a thing that feels so much more natural to me. And I think that I'm because there's so much intimacy with working for yourself and working at home, even in part, it's almost like I think that amount of self-reflection, I think also breeds space for me to think about it that way of just like, God, like if there was just like a way that I could either be bottoming out for myself in the way that like would feel the most effective. I don't know.
Well, you're making me think of like I have a theory as to like why those are different. I'll tell you my theory, and then I want to hear why you think they're different. I'm thinking that like in a dom sub dynamic, like the sub has a lot of control over what happens, whereas like in a boss employee dynamic, the employee really doesn't. So it feels entirely different.
Yeah. Well, what I think it's we're boiling kink, we're boiling doming down to just being authority. It's not necessarily just authority.
Yeah.
It's so much more. There's a back and forth, and then this like if we're talking about the wheel of consent, like it's not necessarily being paid to be there. It's a whole slew of other things that you are exchanging in a dom sub relationship versus like
Right.
you're
And
my boss.
ultimately, right. Ultimately, Joe, like in the dynamic that you're talking about, that person is like in service to you and your goals.
Y'all are making really good points here. Exactly. Yeah. I think that kink is so much more than authority. And I think that like I do also think about labor. Maybe it's also because of like my work background and having had a lot of different kinds of jobs. Like I often feel very empowered at work in a lot of ways because I'm like, you need me, you rely upon me to keep your business running. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
and also that could be just because of my own like the way that kink is kind of like woven into my marrow and like it makes me think about like power across the board. I like a part of me is like, well, it's almost like the opposite when I'm by myself. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Sort of. It's the opposite when you're by yourself. How so?
Like, I don't know. I like I think I need to sit with that a little bit. But like there's
In
a
terms
part
of need, like if you're saying like to a boss, you're like, you need me. If I'm not here, no work gets done and you don't have a job. But in terms of yourself, Is that what we're talking about, the need aspect?
I think I was more so thinking about like the labor aspect of just like, and what is being offered, you know, like when you're in a work situation and you're working for a boss, I feel like you're offering your labor, you're offering like this thing that your boss often can't fulfill on their own or without you in any capacity. So a part of me often feels like very, I don't know, like in solidarity with a lot. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm also like getting a little bit heady and going off subject because I'm kind of nervous.
um okay, well,
I
this
let
is
the bones cook on that a little bit more.
what?
I have to let the bones on that thought cook a little bit more because I feel like
Sure.
I'm like I haven't really thought about that before until just having this conversation. Like, why does it feel so different to be laboring for yourself and in service of yourself when the power dynamic is in fact subverted? It's like, oh, if I do this thing for myself, then I will be able to be prosperous. Or maybe it's, I don't know, some kind of internalized resentment towards the boss man or whatever.
Well, I have a perspective on that because I used to be a boss. I used to be the manager of a place. And what I perceived my job to be was to take care of my employees and have their interests in mind so that we all could have a happy and productive workplace. But there was such a culture of mistrust, and whether it was within the culture of the place I was working or whether it's just like this overall overarching what's it called, like the infrastructure of our society is that the boss is bad regardless of what they do. I often would just get misunderstood and my actions were misconstrued as harm all the time. Because I also was not, I mean, like I was the boss of these people, but I had a bigger boss and I was essentially like a messenger of this bigger boss who was never around and didn't really know what the needs of the employees were, you know? So,
And didn't you also like go from being one of those employees to like getting promoted over? Yeah. I mean, I think that dynamic is also really complicated. Can you tell us what type of job it was without saying the name of the place?
I am hesitant to, just
Okay.
because I feel like it's very directly related. If you
Okay.
know me, you know where I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I don't want to say out loud because I don't want to be misquoth.
Okay. Um, okay. One thing that you're all making me think of, and then we can go towards what we initially said we were going to talk about, is I had a conversation with I have a friend who's a rabbi, and at one point we were talking about like the subby nature of religion and how like getting these directives of like, here's how to be good and here are the rules and the structure, and just follow the things that I tell you to do or that this book tells you to do, can be really freeing and like really gratifying because it's so clear, and exactly what you're supposed to do. It kind of blew his mind and he like brings it up a lot, but it's just, I really loved thinking about it that way because I love, Joe, you were talking about how like kink is like woven into the marrow of your bones and makes you think about power in so many different ways. I think thinking about religion this way kind of allowed me to look at power within the context of religion in a way that I had never really thought about it before. I'm curious what you guys think of that.
I have a lot of thoughts. I think that also I never grew up with any religion. I'm not a religious person and I never was ever very spiritual either. But the closest thing that it makes me think of is learning something new, like physically, even like learning a skill physically and feeling this internal feeling of like, I'm good. Like this kind of feeling like, wow, look at how my brain just did that. It's like a flow state feeling. If we're talking about creativity and kink, like it is a flow state. And like I think that I have heard other people who are religious or have deep spirituality liken it to just being like, I don't understand, but I'm not necessarily thinking about my next moves. I just know what's set before me, my tasks, whether they're like spiritual or literally like I'm cleaning my room. And I just go about them in this way that makes me feel effortless.
Mm.
And that I think is very, very much a part of that, the kink dynamic of just like, we've set a structure, we've made the Bible together, and
Mm-hmm.
now we just kind of like, we are good. Now it's just good, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The word coming to mind as you're talking is surrender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is so many, that word, if we made a Venn diagram of like work, play, religion.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly
Yes.
what that came to my mind too.
Mm.
It sounds like you're like so, and I also appreciate that you like put Bahar change or like learning on par with God or religiosity or spirituality. Because there's also a part of me that is thinking about this Octavia Butler idea of like God is change. That's the only constant thing that can be relied upon. And like, learning is kind of like just a practice of change. And that feels, yeah, that kind of feels heartening in some ways. It's like there are some things like even like outside of the realm of religion that you can kind of rely upon within the self, but it's also kind of like whenever you're learning something, you're always kind of tapped into some kind of force, you know, like, or like at least like even if it's not like a higher power, let's say, even if it was like horizontal, like you're still kind of in matrix with everything else that has been learned, you know, or like even that lineage of learning or thought. So I think that like thinking about like learning as a way of like tapping into like some kind of like life forces, pretty cool, especially because it to have that, it's like thinking about flow state and thinking about like yoga, for instance. It's like I've had like yoga as like an on and off pretty intensive practice in my life. I know that like I know Mia, like you go to yoga all the time. I can't remember Bahar if you're into
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I go like 3 times a week.
yeah, so it's like it's I feel like when I'm like really deep in a practice and beyond the point of like the the fumbling of like, okay, like this is like really hard and all I'm thinking about is like my body and how frustrated I am with like trying to get the poses, and then the nice teacher is telling me not to think about that, and then I think about you know, like being guided basically towards this point of like you're so strong that you and you're so like regimented with it that you don't actually, you can like surrender and you don't have to think about thoughts anymore, and you can actually connect with breath.
And thus you allow for the change to continue, because when you start to do yoga, you suck. You know, you're like not strong, you don't have stamina, you don't understand what the teacher's saying. They're saying the yogic name for the pose, and you're like, what the fuck did you just say? And then
Especially with
after
hot yoga. I know you do hot yoga. Where like when I did hot yoga for the first time, I was like, someone has to be murdered for this.
Yeah.
This
I was
is
like,
so
this
fucked
is
up.
cruel. This is cruel.
Yes, yes.
I'm stressed and I'm sweating. And
Yeah.
now I'm sweating more because I'm stressed.
And I'm mad. I'm so angry.
Yeah. Yeah. But then later down the line, you're like, oh yeah, I'll go into the Swamasana, da, 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 and you know exactly what that pose is. Like, it's weird. I never like read a book about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Right. It
you know.
becomes kind of second nature. I mean, I love how you guys are talking about this so much, because the way that I lay out consent at the very beginning of this book is that it, like a language or some kind of physical practice, it can become embodied. Where like at first, you know, if you're learning a dance or you're learning an instrument or you're learning a language, you're sort of like, oh, I have to do this and then I have to do this, or, you know, oh, okay, like what is chair pose and where do I put my feet and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually it just moves with you or it flows out of you. And I think so many people learn about consent and at first feel like it's just going to be robotic forever. And once you find that flow with it, it can feel like a very spiritual experience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. I think also when I think about, if I'm thinking about consent, we're thinking about kink, like so much of the mainstream perspective on kink, or even people who are interested, begin their kink practice, and it's a practice, right? Like any creative practice, but they superimpose things onto what they believe is what they feel is good. It's it is it's just, if we're talking about embodying the thing, sometimes the superimposing works, if that makes any sense. Like sometimes you are interested in a thing, you start to do it, it feels clunky, it feels wrong, and you will make mistakes all the time. That's the major thing too, where it's just like part of this change and God and whatever is making mistakes and not being perfect at it. It doesn't necessarily mean like you're not kinky enough, or you're not creative enough, or you're bad at something. You're just starting, and sometimes the superimposing works and sometimes it doesn't. And part of that flow state, I think, is to listen to what is working and to parse out what's not, you know.
Yeah, I think that, so one of the projects I'm working on right now is a book on kink and neuroplasticity, and one of the templates that I'm using for thinking about, like, there's very little scientific research on kink, and it's like it's somatic effect on the body. So I'm reverse engineering like experiments to conduct to research that by looking at things that are already hard, but you do it anyway because the outcome is so great. Is probably the most succinct way that I've figured out how to say that. But I'm looking at like at AA or kind of recovery models, yoga and meditation. The first two I have a lot of experience and thoughts with. Meditation is a little bit harder to access for me, but I feel like it lives in like, oh my God. Did y'all hear that?
It's okay.
I'm gonna D&D. But basically I think that one of the things that feels consistent there in that through line that I'm looking at is like with kink, it's like you show up and you're like, this is going to be, I'm searching for some vague amorphous experience that I understand either in my body or culturally is going to be good. For some reason, I have a desire towards it. Same with like yoga. You're like, people talk about it. I need to work out. Sounds like it's going to be good. But you know, culturally, people tell you that yoga is really, really hard. Popping those headstands, like getting like the regiment of it, the routine of it, it's arduous on the body. It takes you to some kind of transcendental level, and you're curious about it coming into it, but oftentimes not necessarily even quite sure what you're going to get out of it. You know that you're going to get something out of it, but you don't have a reference point for it. Similar to an orgasm. When you're pre-orgasmic, people are like, oh yeah, like you'll know it, you'll feel it, and you'll know it, and you're like kind of working like awkwardly and diligently towards this vague feeling, and it's for some people very uncomfortable. Some people it's accidental, but for some people, in a lot of cases, like thinking about like yoga or like recovery, for instance, where you're like, it's almost like the opposite. It's like, I know that my life is shit right now and I need to get to the other side of it where it's like somehow vaguely amorphously better. So I'm going to take this like rigorous set of steps that usually involve being in a lineage of thought with other people who have taken these rigorous steps in like yoga or in recovery and are like, on the other side of it, it's better. I'm not you, but I can tell you because of millions of people that, you know, their experiences in going through this really hard, rigorous thing has been, like, the effect has been better. I think with kink, it's a harder sell because it's often also in constellation with like all of the deepest and darkest and most depraved behaviors of humanity. So you're kind of like coming directly in contact with both like a lot of like elation, but also with the worst things that people do and are capable of, and all of your demons. And also I think that like sex in general across a lot of cultures has a bad rap. So it's
well,
like
a lot of shame sometimes, like you get very confronted with that.
Yeah. And also like in some spaces, you know, you're like, especially gay sex, queer sex, it's like, actually, you're a sodomite. You're not allowed to have this amount. Also kind of tethering this back to the conversation about religion. I'm an FKA Catholic schoolgirl. And also My parents practiced Santeria. Like that was, so it was, there was like a split my whole life of like, this is like the home-based religion and at school. And like, so a lot is like, a lot of my like shame, slut, kink stuff comes from like the Catholic thing, which is not very uncommon. But anyway, I think that, yeah, like there is like the common thread between all of these big systems, I think, is like there is this idea on the other side that things will be better and that things will, you'll find some kind of sense of comfort, peace, relief, transcendence, community on the other
Release.
release.
Yeah.
On the other side of these rigorous steps that are really laid out either by bodies bigger than you, or that people that have done it before, or even just like this kind of like awkward self-motivation towards rigor and ardor. I think that that's kind of just generally why people pursue a lot of things. I think people are often trying to change, and often I think kink puts you in direct confrontation with like how fucking awkward it can look to want something and to want change and to want that catharsis, instead of it being like, okay, did my yoga class move? That was great. It's like so much of that culture is about like being like more private and to yourself and kind of having this private experience as opposed to like facing like the gross parts of wanting.
Thoughts on all the things you were just saying. So let me just like word vomit a little. So you were like grossness of wanting, or less, we mentioned that at some point, like the shame of sex having a bad rap. It's like that living in vulnerability thing, I think, that is also a big part of learning and a big part of like scratching the surface of what you're curious about. I'm sort of, I think, like especially with sex, especially with like kink and stuff, I wanted I get the sort of like, okay, AA, I get yoga, like the sort of like, I think both of those are implying a sort of like trajectory of betterment or improvement, or like you were talking about being on the one side or another. Whereas I think kink and sex are their own special category of not necessarily improvement, but just curiosity and discovery and
Play.
Yeah, 1,000%. Because I think like in my classes, I always used to say that like, okay, arousal, I would talk about that superimposing what you think is hot versus what you actually think is hot a lot. Like, you know, sometimes it works. Sometimes the things that we, you know, our environment feeds us, we're inspired by things around us all the time. But you have to be very good at listening to what is actually working and what you're doing just because you thought that it was the hot thing to do. And arousal, I think like the you know, when arousal happens is when we are feeling safe and secure and going into uncharted territory at the same time. Because you cannot, I think you cannot spark any sort of like curiosity or excitement if you know exactly what's going to happen next. There has to be a little bit of the unknown, but you also have to feel confident going forth and doing it. So I think that's where like it's edge. We're literally on the edge of things. So not necessarily before and after, but it's like kind of just this play you're playing. Yeah.
I do think that there is, I agree with a lot of that. I do think that there is, for me, I think that because I'm almost like kinky by orientation is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Like, I don't always necessarily think about kink in the same category as sex, especially because I know that we all know it's like sometimes you can have kink experiences, again, have nothing to do with sex, or like traditional sex or genitalia at all, or like arousal in that particular kind of way that most people think about sex. And also, I think that it can have a lot to do with sex. I think it can be sex in and of itself too. But that being said, I feel like because I think about them so separately, and because I also am thinking about like, there is one layer of kink that feels like almost like that initial phase feels like exploratory, curious, or even like in waves, like with, you know, like different partners or like over time, like discovering. But there is also, I think, a part of it I've been kind of like sitting with a lot recently as I try to like improve with certain skills like needle bottoming or learning how to rope top. There is a part of it that is kind of like connected to like just like the rote learning and mechanics and like or like is like motivated by eroticism, but it is also motivated by that like human desire to like learn new skills. And there are certain heights of creativity and there, I guess, therefore curiosity that you can't reach until a certain baseline of like learning improvement has happened. Like for instance, like if you're like, okay, I'm trying to get to a point where I can suspend people so I can have these new experiences. Like one of my friends is like a newer rigger, but has learned crazy fast. And he's gotten so good so fast. And hearing him talk about his experiences now doing suspension versus like doing floor work is like is so different. It's like why right, like you've kind of labored for these new heights of experience in a way. So I think that it's almost like kind of going back to this Venn diagram idea. I do think that it's both, where it's like there is a part of it that's just like kind of fun and playful and explorative. And then also the Virgo and me and Virgo season is like, but there is also some kind of, you know, it's
homework.
Homework.
Homework. I mean, you're talking about honing your craft, which is practice ultimately. And like, totally. I think a lot, you know, as an artist that like sometimes making your art feels like homework, but to think about it as honing your craft so that you're ready when that flow state strikes, like that's what that's all for. You're not always in the flow state. You're not always transcending or channeling or in the change, you know, like, wow, like I am profoundly changed by this experience.
You can't belt the hymn if you don't know the words or the notes.
Right. Right.
Oh.
I love when the segue is organic. Exactly. Yeah.
I love drawing attention to the segue.
Honing a craft in a practice. I think that like in terms of thinking about this larger idea of like, you know, like how kink influences my creativity or my art or like who I am, I do think a lot about like, yeah, I guess that like rigor and that kind of like almost like that erotically motivated or like sensually motivated desire to kind of just like do better. It also is a space of like confronting deep fear, because as I've talked to both of you about extensively, I get really bad stage fright, which is actually the motivation for starting to write this book and thinking about like, oh, like I had been, I'm gonna get personal, is that okay?
Absolutely.
So I had started doing more, like after a certain point, more public kink scenes, like just like more public impact bottoming scenes, nothing too crazy, but felt like a very big risk for me as somebody who was kind of like averse to doing anything in public, and the sex thing in general just has always kind of like, I feel like I labored a lot in like different like kind of therapy modalities and different kinds of conversations to get to a point where I was like, I'm comfortable doing this. And then I think it kind of had some reverse engineering effect, because historically I haven't been able to get myself to do karaoke. I had a few youthful karaoke experiences that were very bad. Another conversation for another podcast, and they just skipped out on it for a long time. And it's like, I love pop music. I love musicals. I love having a good time with people. Went to karaoke with Bahar the other day and they're like, are you going to sing? I'm like, absolutely.
You did? Oh my God. You know, Bahar and I love karaoke. We like every time I'm in New York, I'm like, where's the karaoke night?
I remember going to your birthday once, Joe, for it was a karaoke at that Korean restaurant.
So that was after, yes, I was at INSA with my ex. So that was like one of the kind of moments where I was like, oh, like this is a strange thing that I'm doing, because I don't like this, but it's my birthday.
But it's my birthday.
And I'm making myself do it. And there was also kind of like the intimacy of like having our own room. But even before, I was like, historically, even if I'm by myself or with one other person that I trust deeply or fuck or like is my best friend, as soon as I'm holding a microphone, it's like a frog is in my throat. So after this like set of experiences where I'd started to do public scenes more, then I found myself not only like, now I'll like sit it out a lot of the time still, but I am able to do it. I'm still able to like hold the microphone.
This is so, I really, really want to talk more about this, because my friend is she's always like, I'm so scared and shy, but I want to do it so badly. And she was like, Bahar, you should teach a class about how to do karaoke. And I was like, I don't know, because how do I break through? Anyway, I don't want to distract from your train of thought, but
maybe
I'm
you
very
just
curious.
everyone and then they do it. I think maybe that's
You
the
just
math.
make them.
And they just whack everybody. Because basically what I realized was like doing like a handful of public impact bottoming scenes on one level, it's kind of like it kind of unwound something seemingly unrelated over here. It's like almost when you like are getting a massage and like you work out a knot in one part of your back and then the rest of your back feels a release or something.
Well,
So
I'm drawing, sorry.
no, that's it. It's like the karaoke thing happening over here felt like it was related to this
Yes.
here. And then I'm like, well, that's the
Neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And it's like when you like, I'm thinking of like EMDR, where, when you heal this like, one memory or trauma, or, you sort of desensitize it so it's not as triggering. Many other things also sort of get like lumped into that because it's not an isolated event. It's like part of a whole neural network. So it makes so much sense to me that like as you're opening up in this one particular area, of course you're seeing that happen in other realms of your life. That tracks for me so much. And it reminds me of like the way that when people sign up for my classes on, people pleasing or boundaries and consent, and it's because they're whatever, like having an issue with their roommate or their ex or like with their mother. So often the feedback that I hear after the class is that they like started painting again after years of not painting, or like they suddenly decided that they wanted to finally take guitar lessons, or like whatever it is, people do experience this kind of creative boom. So it makes a lot of sense to me that like as you sort of open up and also experience new sensations of like maybe not fully safety, but like something more like comfort in an arena where you used to feel nervous or even something akin to danger, whether it's like real danger or sort of like perceived, getting on stage can feel so like real danger. Yeah, it makes total sense to me that you're suddenly like willing to fall on your face, willing to be embarrassed, willing to put yourself out there, willing to try new things. And it doesn't matter if you're choking on the words or your voice is stuck in your throat. You're just sort of like, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, it's like the nightmare. I never got this nightmare. I think it was too unsafe, but like the nightmare that a lot of people have, it's like, oh no, you're naked in front of your hole, which is such a perverse collective consciousness, like dream state thing. I'm like, what is that about? But
yeah, true.
The idea that like you're kind of almost like, again, I don't think a lot of people are doing this with kink on purpose, but I do notice like a kink glow up that sort of happens. Like when people ride and like start to situate themselves in their power, whether they're tops or bottoms or switches, there is this part of like the whole like manufacturing of an identity, and also like contriving like the worst villainous parts of yourself, or the like subbiest, like most like humiliated parts of yourself, that like it kind of makes everything else seem so much more chill. So I do think that there is a part of me that after like this handful of experiences of like, oh, I'm like, this is like probably linked to like whatever kind of foolishness that I think is, however, like what kind of fool I feel like I'm going to appear as if I'm doing just like a presentation on a stage or karaoke. And there is some part of me that I'm like, okay, if that's the worst of it and I could survive that, it's like kind of, it almost like manufactured a stretch zone that I didn't around karaoke, because I was like, this is too scary. I will not do this. Danger, bad things will happen, So I do, there is a part of it that kind of like created a buffer zone in a completely unrelated arena. And now I actually like, it's still not my favorite thing in the world, but I guess that's because I need to do more public bottoming scenes.
I think you just do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the medicine.
It's my thesis. Yeah.
There you go.
Have you met your deadlines? Have you drank some water? How many public bottoming scenes have you done this week?
Water break.
Again, I think
We are
the
so
anti-authoritarian in me is like, don't tell me to drink water, and I'm famously not a water drinker.
Me too. I know we're two cancers who hate water.
I hate water.
Okay, I do want to ask my question, and maybe you're feeling a little less shy. I'm wondering what you have learned about yourself that has perhaps surprised you through kink and BDSM exploration and play.
Hmm. It's funny for me, I think that it is not surprising that the things that I found arousing, like the things that I found like, oh, this is part of my sexual library, I guess. This is my sexual vocabulary, were like just so rooted in things that are like role play, role play and like playfulness, silliness. Um, I think that it's too on the nose. And I was like, well, if I'm actually feeling horny or slutty or whatever, I won't really be that silly, will I? And no, it turns out, yes, I'll 1,000% be like the most silly. Like I'm not like a deadly serious top person. I'm laughing. I think the most surprising thing, I guess, was that it was like a little too on the nose. I don't know. At least in the beginning for me, I'm trying to think of like what are some recent things that I've learned.
Well, I think, it's easy to like dismiss the stuff that you've acclimated to in yourself, but I think that there's really something in there that um could be really surprising to a lot of people. I think that like it turns out that I don't think that silliness and sex are often yeah, like silliness isn't often thought of as sexy, but to discover that there's this like really silly part of you that comes out in this role, I think is really cool.
Especially in a power exchange
Yeah,
dynamic. I think it's like I did not expect
right.
this. Like when you think of power exchange, you think it's so serious. Like you have this like perception of it being like someone is telling you what to do and blah blah. For me, it's more of in like a bullying territory.
Uh-huh.
That is a little bit more. Yeah, I think the humor that has to be like there always has to be a thread of humor for me, and I guess that's surprising. Because when I
Mm-hmm.
watch other people do scenes that are not silly, I'm still very into them. I think that they're really hot and I love them. But in on my body, it doesn't work on my body per se.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, that does feel super relatable because I similarly, I think, kind of bought into the narrative that like in order to be hot, like in order to be a good top or a dom, like you had to be very like stoic and bitchy. And I love that shit too, but I feel like I'm such a troll and a clown when I'm topping.
Yes.
And it's like it is one of the things that reminds me that I can bring my whole self to a scene, and I ultimately should be trying to bring as many parts of myself as I feel comfortable bringing to a scene, and that like sometimes even if it's not like an intentional tool, like humor breaks the ice even with myself, and even that shyness that I'm like tended towards. It's like, well, what if I just had fun? It opens up space for play, which I think is really cool. And I think that I'm also trying to block out the sun with myself again. But I think that I think one of the things that I'm perhaps most surprised at is like how much I can take, and how like I think it's like helped me discover like not just kind of more of like an internal sense of power, but more just like generally it just kind of like opens up a sense of expanse for what I'm open to tolerating, and also gives me permission in other areas of my life to not tolerate things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that like Bahar was talking about earlier, it's like having a threshold for like, okay, like, or like a sense of like curiosity about what you actually are into versus what you think you're into. which is a lot harder. Like if you're like not having partnered play, or if you're, I think, just kind of feeling really rigid about what you should like and what you should do, or like kind of acquiescing to like what other people want of you, or if it's work or whatever. I think that it's easier to kind of be like, this is this is how this all should go. And I feel like there is something about kind of leaning into like dynamics that feel really exciting. And like I'm really into like psychological edge play and head games. And it's so hard to kind of walk out of those environments and then not see everything for what it is, if that makes sense. It's like, oh, this person is trying to make me feel small. Not sure why that's happening. You know, like it opens up space for, or like, oh, this person doesn't know it perhaps, but they're bullying me or replicating dynamics that don't feel great. So I think it's like, it's helped me like grow a little bit of a thicker skin, especially like coming from, you know, generally, I think that like we live in a culture that gaslights folks that have been through a lot of crazy stuff, occupy marginalized identities, or just generally disagree with the status quo. And it's like, you can't really, like, there's certain things like from like the inside are always going to feel like a little bit funny, but you don't necessarily know why until you start playing with power. And then you realize that actually most of the time people know exactly what they're doing. And they know
they may not know that they know. And I think that that's something that like I've tried to talk about that sometimes, and I frequently get pushback where people are like, no, you can't be manipulative or malicious or lie without intent. And I'm like, right, but I think you can do things intentionally without knowing that you're doing them intentionally. And there's even like, you know, like dogs do that and they're not thinking consciously that they're trying to manipulate. Like babies before they get, you know, toddlers like learn to fib and trick and stuff before they're not actively thinking like, oh, I can really get away with something. Like it's not this conscious. I totally agree with you, Joe. And I think that often it's like the most dangerous liars are, and most successful liars are the ones who don't know that they're lying to themselves, because then they don't know that they're lying to you. Yeah. Okay, that's a whole tangent, but I want to answer the question. Are you done, Joe? Okay.
Tell us.
Okay. Well, I knew for like a long time. Well, okay. I was in a relationship for about 6 years where I was sort of like relied upon to be the top sexually. And I kind of like learned to do it and I enjoyed it. But never really got to be like in a more, I guess I was also sort of relied on to be more dominant, but I don't know, you know, blurry overlappy space. But I was never really in like I would be in the bottom position, but I was never like the sub in the dynamic. Maybe I can define those terms in writing for people reading later. But then like working for myself, to bring it all the way back to the beginning, Joe, I really started to crave like a work dom, but more along the lines of someone being like, you have to stop working now, like a tech dom. And I had one briefly, like someone who told me that I wasn't allowed to be on my phone. They would take my phone away. They would tell me like, you can't check your phone for an hour. I want you to like write yourself a letter about like how all the things you're really good at. And I felt like I was making so many decisions at work. I was like having decision fatigue, and it would be really nice to have someone else just like take that responsibility away from me in a lot of other areas of my life. But it wasn't until recently that I discovered that I do really enjoy being a sub sexually. And one of the things that has surprised me so much about that is that the trust that I experience in that dynamic has made my body capable of doing things that for the rest of my life until recently, I just thought like I'm not capable of doing that. Ways that like my body opens up or like can tolerate things, or like like one of you said, like that you can take more than you thought, whether it's like impact or pain or pushing or being restrained. So yeah, that's something that has really, really surprised me, because I've recently had several experiences where I'm like, whoa, I did not know that I could do that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the adrenaline too. I feel like,
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite things to do, whether it's kinky or sexually or both, is wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I love wrestling, whether it's like mini, like little tiny fights, or just like full body wrestling, where it's just like, I don't care if you're like 3 times my size, like I'm going to go for it. And yeah, that sort of like, it's, if we're bringing back the idea of like, this is vulnerability. I'm curious. I'm playing with you. B, I'm discovering my threshold in terms of like, I'm gonna give this my all in a way that I wouldn't give anywhere else in my life. Like, this is gonna go to a point. And I'm telling this person, I mean, before we wrestle, I'm like, don't touch my neck, don't touch my, like I'll sort of be like, please don't touch these places. And like, but don't, we'll tap out
Right.
if something starts to hurt, but like, don't hold back, and then you kind of learn, especially, sometimes wrestling is like 3 seconds. I'm like, oh, you fucked me up. I have to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, threshold is really fun when suddenly I'm pinning someone down and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, it's exciting. I took a fetish wrestling class in New York last year. I didn't tell you
Really?
about that? Yes.
No.
I would
Next
go back
time you
with
go,
you.
please,
Yes,
let's go. I would
absolutely.
love to.
It's my friend Lola Jean. Do you know her? No? Well, maybe you will soon.
I would love to.
Yeah, she's like a pro fetish wrestler.
Joe, weren't you there? We were at one of those parties where I think I started to wrestle.
Yeah, you wrestled with my ex. It was really fun.
I definitely wrestled you. I just remember that.
It was a really good match. You actually both definitely put up a really good fight, and it was
Yeah, I think they put me down very quickly, but
it wasn't as quick as you think. It actually I was like, you both.
Bob.
Yeah, it was a fun fight. I love watching wrestling. I feel like it's actually, I love like WWE wrestling, and I also
Nice.
wrestlers in my family, so it's
the horniest stuff I've ever seen in my life.
Oh
it's
my God,
so
I know.
Filthy.
Yeah.
It's filthy, and I think that it's crazy that like people think that it's not gay, or it's like not. It's one of the most overtly. Everybody's in a Speedo. Like 90% of people are in Speedos.
And they're performing, like they're literally performing.
Oh,
it.
yeah.
It's not like they're actually wrestling.
It's a show.
So it's so gay.
Yeah, it's like you
they're in drag.
Right. And it's like people will be sitting on each other's faces.
Yeah. Swinging each other around by the crotch in their face.
Right. It's like, or like going to the top of the ropes, and then like somebody will just kind of like bottom out, be like wobbling there. And it's like you grab shoving their head in your crotch. It's insane. It's disgusting. And it's so fun. It's one of the most fun things I ever watched. I think that especially recently, because I've discovered that like the women's wrestling league has gotten so much better. It used to be very much like, this is the opening act, and now it feels more like Bring It On, where it's like the cheerleaders are the main event.
Yeah, nice. Hell yeah.
Costumes are better, the storylines are better. But anyway, I digress. I think that wrestling is hot, and I would go with you to this class.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me find out when she's doing it again, because I always love an excuse to go to New York. Like, there's no reason for me not to go. And if there's a date, we can do that, and then we can go to karaoke. She also does kinky karaoke.
What
does that
Which
mean?
I did go to. Okay. I'll tell this story, and then we'll have to wrap up. Okay, so I went to this fetish wrestling class, and then I went to kinky karaoke, which is people come with an act, and they've practiced their song, and sometimes people come and they do like a BDSM scene that they've rehearsed, or they do a burlesque strip tease. And I did not know that, you guys, because I didn't do my homework. And I went and decided with the other fetish wrestling instructor, there's 2 of them, I asked her if she would be willing to wrestle me while I sing Casual by Chappell Roan. And the reason why I love this story is because I love this example of consent where I'm agreeing to a certain amount of risk. Because here's what happened. I was like, okay, as my act, would you wrestle me? And we had like 2 minutes. And she said, yes. Like, what do you not like? What's off limits? What's okay? And I was like, I don't remember any of the terminology. You're the instructor. Anything that we covered in that class is fine with me. And I trust your judgment. So part of what I was agreeing to was the unknown. And I also was agreeing not to be angry with her, even if something happened that I didn't like or that hurt me or that I regretted. Like I was saying, I am putting my trust in you. And it's not that you're not going to be capable of doing anything wrong, but that I am taking responsibility for agreeing to a bunch of stuff that I can't possibly know ahead of time. And then we did it, and it was so much fun. And I think I love that
Were you
example.
able to sing?
Kind of. I'll send you the video.
I have to see this.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was really hard. Plus, I was just like laughing the whole time.
Yeah, that's the best.
And like, I think I was like upside down at one point and couldn't get the microphone, and I couldn't see the words,
Yes, amazing.
But I just feel like that I really think it's so important to look at consent as like agreeing to, a way to take risks and like leap into the unknown in a supported way with care, but without expecting or demanding like 100% guaranteed safety.
Yeah. You're not asking to be coddled.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Even if you are asking to be coddled, I think that's cool. But I think that like, if that's what you want and need, but I think that I think that I kind of learned this through like working in venues, like that I'm trying to create like safer spaces or safe spaces, is that you're going to harm people the second that you agree that the space that they are entering is risk-free, or that like it's a safe space, like as opposed to being like a space that's safer or a space that's like risk aware or is engaged in harm reduction. Once you're guaranteeing safety, you're like kind of putting forth this idea that you exist in utopia. And
right.
That's automatically I'm sussed out as soon as I hear this, because I'm like, well, what material conditions are in place to
how is that possible? It's not possible.
It's like if a hurricane hits, this is no longer a safe space. It's a crisis. So yeah, I think that like, yeah, I'm sussed out by the idea of assuming that because you're consenting to something, that everything that transpires is going to be great for you, and that if everything that happens is what is agreed to, is still somehow the like on the person that you're engaging with, as opposed to it being like everybody's coming into this as like risk aware adults, and maybe we're like working towards a point where we're like, okay, if shit hits the fan, or like after the fact, it's like, this is how we'll care for each other, or this is how I'll follow up with you to make sure okay and you get back to stasis, or this is not my responsibility, like this is, but I'm encouraging you to take care of yourself afterwards. Like I think that a lot of people assume that, and I feel heartened even by this conversation, because a lot of people are just trying to seek safety, for lack of better term. Like people are often just trying to like feel assured that everything is going to be okay. And I think that that's poetic, but it's also not possible. So I think that sometimes the idea of like surrendering and knowing that things are actually not going to be okay, things are going to be really painful, and things are going to be uncomfortable and messy, or like might not go how you want to, like that feels actually more like living in the world for me than anything else.
I feel more inclined to trust you is like, if you're anticipating that, expecting that, prepared for that, prepared and equipped for repair and check-ins, rather than like, I immediately distrust someone who's trying to guarantee safety. I'm like, that's not realistic.
Yeah. It's not a force field. It's not like this like impenetrable force field of perfection. It's weird.
No.
Yeah.
And kind of just as like one last straggler thought, I think that like thinking about the tether between consent, negotiation, kink for me often looks like, yeah, like I feel like a lot of the time people think that negotiation has to be so flat and so unhot. And I think that like for me, a lot of the time, I don't know where this fits into the larger episode, so maybe we should stop, but
Go ahead.
I think that like there is also a part of me that's like, yeah, if you're doing the negotiation thing right, it should be like one of the hottest parts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's
Like,
also sometimes the most creative part because you have to get specific. And sometimes like the one of the most exciting sexual experiences that I have, like consistently still as an adult, because just like, I don't know, I'm not doing a ton of stuff that like I haven't done before. But one of the things that always feels new is like if my partner says, "Do you want to do this thing?" And it's just something I've never thought of. Like it's not like a new sex act. It's just like, what if we put lube there? And I'm like, oh, I've never thought of that. That sounds sure, let's try that. Like that, like even still, and we've been together for a year and a half, I frequently get asked, what do you want to do tonight? Like while we're in bed, like talking about the sex that we want to have. And I feel like that's a part of sex that people either often don't ever have or only have like when they're first getting to know each other. But it's so fun to make a plan. Even if you deviate, like that's so hot.
I think so. I think it's just kind of, it's fun to kind of shine a light on desire no matter what. I think it's like having to be like really explicit. And like I think that that's like, if you're, again, it's like dirty talk. If you're like, oh, okay, I have to lay out a menu of all the things that I want you to do to me, and then you get reiterate to me like what you're going to do to me or what you want to do to me. I think that that's crazy. I think that that's so fun.
So much fun.
I'm thinking of specifics I can't say here out loud, so
Okay, well, we can stop there. This was so fun, you guys. I'm like, my friends are so brilliant and so hot. And it's just like, it's so nice. And it's like so nice to do this in like a sort of professional, because like I feel like if we each had a glass of wine at the karaoke bar, like we would have had the exact same conversation. But
it's true.
Yeah, it's
yeah. There is also, I mean, no wine for Joe, which has been a big theme today. But like I do think that like I've been thinking about that this whole time. I'm just like, how are my friends so hot and fun and brilliant? I just don't understand.
Yeah.
You. Yeah. Joe was like, "Are we supposed to prepare?" I was like, "Oh, I thought we were just gonna vibe for like an hour."
Literally. Joe was like, "Do I have to come with questions? Like, can I do prep?" And I was like, "No, Joe, don't worry. Like, we're just gonna chat." I guess I can stop the recording. Joe, I didn't know that